metadata. There we go. Michael, fantastic. Yeah, that would be great. Maybe we can look for some people to help us go through the first version of the metadata training, and just so that we can get some feedback. Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask is Drew, and this is a question that I got on the side, and before that is where does the responsibility for the data catalog exist? Now, certainly my understanding is that it's a metadata element, very similar to your data lineage, and it's there to bring in all of the data assets as to where they're located and where we can find them. Is that your understanding as well, Drew?
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes there's a bit of confusion between the business glossary and the catalog, but absolutely the catalog is a responsibility of metadata, and they do it and depend on the kind of even the meta model that you put down. I probably will touch on it, though I won't by actual name. But to me, the business data stewards are the people that contribute a hell of a lot of the information catalog.
Yeah.
And
then
definitely, yeah.
Of course, with all the new tools, they're able to scan the databases, looking for different assets in different places, anything from Excel spreadsheets to databases to
yeah, that is definitely a feature of a lot of the new tools. I mean, it's one of the things that I was going to talk about next week as well in terms of best practice, because I've seen it go badly wrong. For instance, or what I've seen in people harvest the contents of the data lake without being selective, without starting with critical data elements. And you think about the average data lake or data swamp, it's got, it could have 60, 70,000 attributes, many of them that have been triplicated or quadrupled or whatever else. And you then harvest that data and suddenly you come up with it. Oh, look, I've got 375 of the same term. And then you look at the term and it says date loaded. It was the data that was loaded into the lake, or the data that was loaded from the lake into the data set for the data science. So you've got to get rid of that noise. Otherwise, it's overwhelming. And then if it's been treated as a project, the project team are saying, oh, but you're making no progress. You're saying, but I can't. Yeah. No, definitely it's strongly within metadata management, but with input from quality, from BI, from integration, from architecture, from all of those other places.
And what I like to do is and I know there's John O'Gorman on the line, is to actually front a lot of this metadata with using the business glossary. So in terms of the people come through the language of the business to where the data is found. And of course, there's a difference between classification of assets and where they're at and what they're for, and then the actual assets themselves. So the glossary is a fantastic path. The classification and search is another area, but that's how they come into the environment. That's how they come into the metadata, and from there they can find their way to wherever they need to go. So
Howard, if you remember last week, I actually suggested that there's two additional advantages to having the glossary. The one would be to use it as part of the induction of new staff members into the organization. Terms are going to be there, everything's going to be there. And I also suggested you could use it to replace the included in every single business spec and data sharing agreement and. So it can become a living document of the real business terms that are being used, and then from that, what are the attributes that make up those terms? What are the formulas that make up those, or the calculations, so that everybody's using the same to introduce as part of some come across a new term, put it straight into the glossary, and it's there once and for all for everybody to use.
Fantastic. Thanks, Drew. I didn't want to take up too much of your time. There were just some interesting questions, people wanting to know where it fits.
I love it. For me, it's almost the rock star of metadata. That and the catalog. All the rest is obviously very useful.
Yeah.
But most of that is inward techie focused. The catalog and the glossary are that aspect of metadata that broadcast out to the broader public.
And I suppose that lineage, both from the report all the way to the source, and from the source to the report, in terms of all
Yes.
the movement, that becomes big in terms of understanding change or understanding where did this thing come from. So yeah.
Well, we can touch on that quickly, but for me, that is crucially important, both from an impact analysis perspective. Plus, it helps avoid duplication. So often, if you've got a bit of a mess in your lake, it's easier just to land the data set again with another. Can I just enhance it? And then, once stuff lands, for instance, in a BI environment or in a lake, and it starts getting transformed into a data product, to be used elsewhere, maybe to be monetized, whatever, you absolutely have to have that lineage to say, this data product that I'm making available to sell to, for instance, my suppliers, I can tell exactly where it came from and what it means. It's a bit like with that original Basel Accord, the BCBS 239, and through to those models and that reporting, the regulators were categoric that you needed to be able to show that lineage through all of those hops, whether you were using a MART, a SAS model, IFRS reporting, whatever else. You had to be able to show that it had arrived there untouched, and you knew where it was and who was responsible for it.
And I mean, I remember having to do that with the CFO in BCBS 239, where you'd have to be able to dumb that data lineage down sufficiently enough, but not too dumbed down that he could see where some of those risk levels were being transformed or things like that. And they had to sign the document that everything was fine, so it's quite a step that we took in terms of getting business involved in understanding that data, that metadata.
And hopefully it's paying dividends.
Yeah.
All right.
That's true.
Okay, let's share this thing. Just confirm to me that you're getting the right page when it comes up. Hang on a second,
Whilst you're loading, just for anyone, you can add your questions in the chat, and then I'll ask Drew when he gets a break. I'll interrupt if that's okay, or put your hand up. Either one we'll be able to pick up. All yours, Drew.
Can you?
Yes, we can see it. I can see it, Data Citizen.
You can see.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can see my cursor moving on it?
Yeah, I can.
Cool. So what we're going to talk about today, I'll touch. So last week we went through the requirements and strategy and all of the rest, and I'm going to just do a very quick refresh in case there are people attending this week that weren't here last week. So just again, what is metadata? What are the different flavors of metadata? It's quite a fun little slide. And why is metadata important? And I think you've just highlighted that for me, Howard, with your question around the catalog and the glossary. And then what is your role with metadata? I'll talk a little bit about decision making and collaboration, but at a fairly high level, and maybe we'll just touch on the governance. And then knowing next week we're going to take a really, really deep dive, and then we're going to look at the business case and everything else. So remember last week we spoke about Hercules, the data manager for metadata, carrying the world on his shoulders. I feel sorry for the man, but he stepped up for the job. So now this week, and also we spoke about the origin. Sorry,
Drew. It was Veronica. Just it reminded me of was it Atlas or was it Hercules?
Listen, I'm giving the presentation, so it's Atlas or Hercules or whoever else. I don't know. It could be one of
I think it was
maybe
Atlas.
maybe it was the Charles
Hercules
Atlas.
was strong enough to do that.
Charles Atlas was the bodybuilder. All right. We also spoke about last week just about the origins of metadata. One being the libraries of Alexandria in ancient, I suppose it was Greece, whatever, in the 3rd century BC, where all of those tablets had been catalogued into a fantastic library by a chap called Telemachus, and they used the word Pinnacus, which is the Greek word for boards, and then I mentioned also the Clementine library, and just some of the things. So they catalogued the scrolls, but with a subject from whatever it was, so the genre and whatever else. So already then the guys were thinking. They had a very broad system of classification, so easier for people to find stuff. They showed the author, and they also showed things like a description, title, whatever, much like we see if we were to look at the metadata for a book. And then I did mention this Clementine library in Prague, which is worth a visit if ever you do get a chance to get there. Metadata is data about data, and it's used to provide the content, the structure, easy to find and understand, and it provides the specific information. I'm going to go through this a little bit later with regards to where the business data steward fits, where the technical data steward sits, and maybe where the meta steward sits if we have as such, but it's at quite a macro level, but it could open up for some interesting conversations. So if we look at the different types of metadata, and if people want to add some or ask any questions, please by all means do so. But most definitely, as we were just business terms and the synonyms for those terms. So if you're in insurance business and there's a term called persistence, what does persistence mean? What are the rules behind it? What are the attributes that get used? And if we're looking more on a marketing customer side, what does churn mean? What is sale? Is it a gross sale? Is it a net sale? In the retail side, they talk about ranging and assortment planning, and there's all of these things in the finance world. There's all the different risk terms and other terms, but very often there will be a term that's used, but then there might be a whole bunch of other terms for it as well. So that is definitely I think the most useful part of metadata, and it starts the drive down into the rest. Another thing might be the business rule. It could be that if you're signing up a new customer, they have to be between 18 and 65. They can't be older and they can't be younger. That's a business rule. You capture that in the metadata so that you could read it, you could refer to it when you looked at the rules around onboarding a customer. If there's a calculation, for instance, if they're doing something like shrinkage or stock turn or anyone, you mentioned those risk calculations as part of the Basel Accord. What are those calculations? What do they mean exactly? That there's no nebulism about them. People cannot presume whatever they want to. It's spot on. It's also about the definition of data sets and tables and columns. Just a rough idea. So a data set lands in the data lake, and it might have a name of weekly sales by customer, by store, by product. Then you know what it is. You know what the columns are. You know everything else about it. The stakeholder details, that gets more down to ownership and stewardship. Very, very important to looking at a data set, that attribute, or whatever else. Document the downstream stakeholders. If you are engineering data and producing data products that are being used a marketing department to run campaigns or used to monetize data by creating scores, your downstream stakeholders have to know where this is, and whoever's building this data set needs to know who the downstream stakeholders are for change control and just for is on par. Your data quality rules and your data quality results are also a type of business metadata. You know, if you can say I'm landing this data set and on average it is 99% accurate based over time, and from there go to the technical metadata and go and see the actual results, you're on a win. Data standards, whatever those might be, they can be documented as part of business metadata. The business can say, yes, it is right, no, it's not. It does tie in with your data quality rules. If there's transformation that is happening along the way, so for instance, if you are taking a data set that's got daily sales and you're rolling it up to weekly sales and monthly sales, you can then hear your business term will say what a weekly sale is, what a monthly sale is, and you will define the transformation rules to say monthly sales runs from the 1st to the 31st. And it can only run when all of the stored data has been processed. This is what we also spoke about briefly, your provenance and your lineage. Where did the data come from? What were the different hops? Was there transformation in place? Did it pass the quality rules? Is it fit for purpose? Can I put my hand in my heart and say, yes, use it? If I'm offering data to a third party, even if I've anonymized it, can I that data being, other than maybe being anonymized, that data is not being fiddled with. It is pure, it is correct. It is very, very important. And I think more so when you're starting to build AI models, you know, large language models, and when you're starting to monetize data by selling subsets of data, by selling scores. You know, if you think about companies like ICT, TransUnion, and the scores that they build, they have to be really, really certain about their quality rules and their lineage. The data sharing agreements as well, you could document that in your business metadata. It's about, from instance, the HR people, they're allowed to share some data that is not classified as highly private, whatever else, but what is the rule? Or from an ERP system, they need to share data with maybe a supply chain system. That you're about to see the terms that are used, you're about to see the data sets, the tables, the columns. That's all sits inside there, and it's very clear, very easy for people to see and to reference. And it also takes away a lot of the ambiguity about that sharing, and it also prevents duplication. If you've got this, mostly these days, or organizations that I've seen, this kind of stuff is documented inside things like ARIS. But then ARIS is that expensive that not everybody's got a license and not everybody can see it. And it causes endless problems. If you could share this via business metadata, via a portal, in your glossary and your catalog, it just becomes that much more readily available and open to be shared. When it comes to your business terms and rolling down into your attributes as well, your security and privacy classification. You know, if you talking about and you go into the attributes for customer, you can say, well, from a security perspective, this needs to be guarded because it's been classified as private. And here's how we do it, and can we check it? Are there pieces that are maybe just for general use, and are there pieces that are highly secure, need to be highly secured? For instance, you might name a name in a look at somebody's medical records. If you're starting to look at their financial records, that is data really, really well protected. Broadly categorize that data. There are recommendations around the privacy side as well as archive and retention that you could then start applying metadata-driven rules to how these things should run if you've got the tools to do them. Does that make sense? You know, for instance, if you're talking about customer, that would be part of customer, employee, patient, they're all part of a subset of financial records. They're all part of a subset of data as classified. I can't remember the name of the one or two companies that have actually done it, but it is there and you can apply that. So that's kind of your business. I need to stress we're talking here structured metadata. I haven't gone into the unstructured side of things at all. That's another whole Atlas Hercules can of worms. So when we talk
Sorry, Drew.
technical metadata, yes.
Once you go back to your business here, now I put something in the chat in terms of what the DMBOK defines as operational metadata. Now, some of the things that are in your business metadata are actually in what the DMBOK defines as operational metadata. Now, I've always battled specifically with the example of data sharing rules and agreements, which are in the operational metadata, but we also know that that's the sort of governance thing, that the SMEs are doing now. And it also mentions archive and retention as operational metadata. So
yeah,
I know that I basically say to the people, when you do your exam, and Veronica does that, when you do your exam, you better look up and make sure that you've got the right place, and you've got it in the right area, because where I agree with you, sharing agreements rules are what I perceive to be business. They've got it as operational metadata. What's your?
I would agree with you. So maybe I'm generalizing here, but most times, operating at the level of the business, so business users, data stewards, data owners, business analysts, that kind of stuff, are very unlikely to even get access to the operational metadata. However, if they can go and look at a class of data and say, right, I'm looking at customer data, what is its security? What does the regulator say are the archive and retention periods for that? So it's at that kind of level. It's when you do the deep dive, as you're saying, that I think it becomes operational metadata. But
Yeah,
I don't think.
What I like to do is help people by saying, if we look at the data lifecycle, business metadata is typically created in that plan and design phase. For example, your logical conceptual data models, whereas your operationals in that use and enhance from store to use and enhance and dispose. So I've always wanted to find a way of understanding where this metadata should be, because there are so many things that none of us can really remember, especially when it comes to the exam. So
see, what I would simplistically like to see, that if you could classify, for instance, let's call it customer data and the attributes of a customer data here in this kind of level. If you could classify that this is customer, and then for customer, you could say the generic security and privacy classification for customer is X, and according to legal, the archive and retention requirements for that data is Y, and then you can drive metadata to deliver that through the operational side. For me would be perfect, because to try and do it at a attribute level across all of your systems just becomes almost impossible. But maybe we should discuss this one a touch more as to what would be the best way to do it, or the right answer to put in for the exam.
I mean, and we've seen on a few occasions, I think Veronica's got some of the questions marked up where they catch you on this thing, because it says data sharing rules and agreements, we would just say, well, that's sort of business related, or retention.
But it's not. It's actually technical metadata, because it should define what data you're sharing and how often. All of that side of it.
No, you also see that in my screenshots I shared, that's in operational metadata. So this is the horrible thing, is that it can jump around, depends on which way you're viewing it. These things can jump around. So for just advice for everybody, take a good guess using that life cycle thing, and then go and double check come back to those pages and make sure you've answered it correctly.
Oh,
as per the DM book, yeah.
Yeah, not as per Drew Kennedy. So then when you get to the technical metadata, this is where you're starting to consume things like database properties from data dictionaries. You're getting your column names and the properties, the physical tables. You should be able to see your access permissions. You should be able to see your CRUD rules. Veronica, what's that? Create, read, update, delete. Yeah.
Create, read, updates, and delete.
So I've got another one for you, Drew. What's CRUD E rules?
Crude rules.
What are the crude rules?
Crude.
No, but what does the E stand for?
Eventually.
Execute. So you
okay.
can have permissions on executing stored procedures and functions and things like that.
But, okay.
Oh.
Is that a little E or a biggie? We can put it in.
A biggie.
Okay. Your technical metadata, it could be your ETL rules. It could be the source to target mapping. Could be your data lineage documentation. Could be API rules, application program interface rules. That's quite important, especially when companies are sharing data via APIs. For instance, a company may make a call on another company to get a score. And if you know what the API rules are and standard, it just makes that consistency more guaranteed, and anybody trying to do debugging and stuff could come there. Technical side would also be your data quality reports, your data access rights, data groups, roles. Pretty much anybody that's involved at the technical level of working with data could or should use, I believe, is technical metadata, and there might be more that goes into here than actually what I've listed. But and this kind of stuff would not be in the glossary. It might start being in a catalog, but almost definitely it would start being in the repositories and the dictionaries and all of those kind of stuff, which kind of, if you look from the narrow end of a funnel, it just gets broader and broader. Okay, then another one is the operational one. Okay, what did we need to put in here, Howard?
It's the archiving and
I'll add
retention.
I'll add it. That's what I'm making out here. See, if I were to think about that specific thing as well, is in your operational metadata, you would be able to see that something has been archived. But I still believe that you'd probably look at your either your technical, your business metadata to see what the recommended archive period is, somebody with a retention side. But I'm not gonna get precious about that. Because if you think you're looking here at error logs and job schedules and batch logs and replication status and audit and control measures and checks and balances and the histories of extracts and the results and what even patches and version control probably is more technical metadata. Thinking about it.
Yeah. I like to almost understand that operational metadata is when we're moving data. And what actually happened during the movement of data. What are the different areas? But I found it hard to get a good definition of it. They talk about details of processing and accessing of data. So,
but when you come in from the data quality side, they more and more focusing in on data at rest, and then data movement, data observability.
Yeah.
So, like error logs and replication status and order control, those things, that would all be based on data at rest. Although error logs, batch logs could be,
Yeah.
idea was opening up another whole can of worms here.
Yeah, it's
But the interesting one for me is the volumetric and usage patterns. Typically from my days back and when I was young and still had blonde hair and a beard, and was responsible for performance. You know, you'd have your machine set up, everything would be running really, really nice, and then suddenly people would start complaining about response times or whatever. And then you suddenly find out the volume of data has gone up a significant amount. It's gone up 20%. Hence, the batch processing time has gone up 20%. And if you're not keeping track of these kind of things, you get caught unawares, because then you can also set your SLAs. You can say, right, this job, based on the job schedule, this job needs to run in 30 minutes. Is it because of this? Is it because of something else? So it makes your a bit easier, and it also gives you some foresight as to problems that are coming. Other comments?
all good.
Okay. So based on that, and we did say this topic of talk today was around stewardship, and it is look, there was all kinds of examples of stewardship from way back. And one of the definitions is a responsibility to take care of something that is not one's own. So in this case, a wine steward's not a good idea, but anyway. And it implies a sense of duty, trust, and accountability. And the concept of stewardship has been present through human history, evident in various cultures and societies. I try to find some nice examples, but I wasn't that successful, but I'll keep looking for it. Then the DMBOK says steward is the ongoing responsibility to ensure that data remains of value to the enterprise. And our mate McGillray in 2008, data stewards manage data assets on behalf of others and in the best interests of the organization. And this is in the DM. Just be aware if anybody asks who this dude was.
It's a her. It's a Jeanette McGillray.
Oh, is it a J? Ah, okay. Maybe I must change it to say J. Let me make a note of that. All right. And then what I've done for this particular one is just taken a fairly broad look at data stewards, because if you'd really dive in through the governance side, I think they listed about 6 or 7 levels of stewards, coordinating stewards, and then chief data stewards, and. But I think from the perspective of metadata, they really are the two types: is the business data stewards and the technical stewards. And these guys make sure that their data aligns with objects, business objectives, and supports decision making. And them being typically business people. Although I see organizations these days are appointing full-time business data stewards, and very often people without domain knowledge. Business, they're typically working in the business, and they're very often involved in defining the requirements and the standards, as well as getting involved in change management for system enhancements and that kind of stuff. So in a retail world, the business stewards are typically the buyers or the buyer's assistants. They're the people that are having to list products, the products that are going onto the shelves or the products that are going onto the portals. In an insurance business, quite often the data stewards are those people that are manning the sales area of the contact center. So they're the ones that are coming in contact with clients, coming in contact, capturing their data. In the banking world, I'm scratching my head to say who would be the best data stewards, because I think depending on where you are, if you're looking at signing up new customers, people that work in there, if you're looking at financial advice, it's probably somebody else. But yeah, there are people that would have deep understanding of the business and quantity. Maybe we could have a quick wrap around or a quick knock around at the end and say, what do people think would be the right data stewards in a financial industry, in a bank? These guys typically also would report into the data owner of that data domain, whereas the technical guys, they focus on the technical aspects, so it's quality, security, integration. They would have deep expertise, probably in modeling and warehousing and the governance tools. They could have a lot of other information, other knowledge as well. Some of them might have come out of a development background, out of a DBA background, whatever else, but they really do know how to work with tools and with data. And then there is something called a metadata steward, but maybe this is also the metadata analyst, so they could be tasked with maintaining the metadata, working in collaboration with the business data steward and working in collaboration with the technical data steward. And for instance, the business data steward might have a template where they can capture a whole bunch of business terms with the definitions and with the attributes and give it to the meta steward, who could actually load it up if the business stewards don't have that capability to be able to do that. It could be that the meta steward works with the technical steward to say, let us refine how we onboard data. So between the two of them, they might well write some new scripts or put in place an API or build the reports that enable these guys to see what is happening, to be able to start measuring the quality and to focus on that side of the metadata in the business. Where it gets easy.
Drew,
yes.
There's a hand up. MQ has his hand up.
Yeah, please go.
Yes, thank you, Howard. Thank you, Andrew. Am I allowed to raise a question? Or
yes, please do.
Yeah, thank you for that. For the type of metadata, especially for the business one, I'm just wondering, it's gonna be like too much information for some of the stakeholders or the people who need the business metadata. Capturing all this information, it's going to be kind of too much for them to go through all these things. My question is there going to be like sub metadata, business metadata for specific area, for example, for people who is really concerned about the governance and the accessibility to the information. They don't care about the type of data or the stuff, the owners and the stuff. Can we do it like many version of the business metadata? Each version can serve a group of people.
So what are some of the metadata tools?
I don't know if my question is clear.
I think it is. Let me answer, and then if it's not doesn't clarify, then we can dive a bit deeper. So my experience with some of the metadata tools in the market is that you are able to create views for specific audiences. So if you were exposing the glossary to senior business people, you would give them a very thin slice that only gives them the bit of information that they need to do. When you expose that data, for instance, to data stewards, you could have a view that is much more deep. So very definitely you can, and I think you should tailor also set up the metadata portal or the place where people come in. Set that up in such a way that people can ask questions and get the answers that they want, that they need, without getting swamped by too much detail.
Drew. Yeah. Remember, as part of setting up of your metadata, that one of the first things we have to do is go and understand the business requirements for metadata and the technical requirements for metadata. And of course, you have a context where this business person is potentially working in this domain or subject area. So what you want to do is almost link the context in which they're coming from with the requirements and then delivering the information as per the requirements, and then, if necessary, allowing them to drill down into more detail. So I like to start with, well, what was your requirement for this? Can I deliver that using the views, as Drew said? And then also bounding that by, if you in customer area, customer care, then you would be, your focus would be on customer data. Otherwise, you can give them every single data set or every single term, and it may go crazy. Q, does that help you?
Yes, thank you.
If I can build on what you've said, I think it's imperative that you do it by domain, and within the domain, the critical data elements.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's like a tsunami coming at you. You've got absolutely no chance of handling it, of coping with it. And that, if you do it by domain as well, I haven't really touched on it today, but very often people starting out on a metadata initiative, they say, shit, where do we start? And like I said, harvesting the whole lake. If they start with saying, what is my critical domains that support my business strategy and my data strategy, start there. And then, as you quite rightly outlined, and I did touch on it last week, what are their requirements? What do they need to see, and what do they want to use that data for? And you will have different layers. So you would start at the top with a fairly high level 10-mile view, and then you could drill down into the deep, dark depths that would be more appropriate to technical people or people that are doing analysis and stuff.
Thanks, Drew.
Okay. So as I said, it's fairly easy to be a data steward. Like an octopus, you can juggle the operational metadata and the technical metadata and the business metadata. And then we didn't touch on the unstructured data, but the descriptive side and the structural and admin and whatever else. But there are just so many terms, and it just gets more and more and more confusing. So what we do is, if I take that picture that we looked at the beginning, this is in the DMBOK, the who data, and if I take a business data steward and a technical steward and a meta steward, and this could be open to data steward that will know who created the data, meaning which line of business, which domain was this data created in. That, so they would know, as a business data steward, they would know, and they would be able to get that information captured right. They would also know, the business data steward, what is the business definition of that term and that element. The technical data steward would know where this data is stored. They would also know, where did it come from. They would likely know where it's being used and shared. They would likely know, for that same data, where's the backup. And they probably hopefully should know what the technical naming standards are for the database implementation of this data element that is linked back to something in the business glossary. Should know who the steward of the data is, because they probably are the steward. They would have been involved with downstream usage side of things. They would know who's agreed to it and what the requirements, what the rules, what everything else is. And then on the technical side, there would be something about how does that flow. They would also know who owns the data, because typically, if it's a business data steward operating in a domain, the owner of that data is likely the owner or the header of that. They would typically, being the data steward, also know what are the rules for that data. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're looking at a new customer, they've got to be between 18 and 65. If you're looking at wanting to join Investec, you have to have money in the bank with $1 million. There's these kind of rules. If you want to join a loyalty scheme, you have to relinquish whatever or share whatever data. they should also know, maybe this is going back to what we discussed a bit earlier, but I think that the business data steward needs to know what the security and privacy level requirements are for that data. Because if they don't know it, how do they pass it down? How do they tell it down? They should also know and capture the abbreviation or the acronym or the synonym for that element. And I'll touch on something a little bit later, but like customer, know whether there's regional requirements. Very often what is acceptable in South Africa is not acceptable in Mozambique, in Kenya, in Uganda, in some of the other countries. So they would need to know that. I mean, very interesting recently there's a province called Cabinda in Angola, and they brought in a ruling around, specifically around tax, that the tax in Cabinda, the tax rate in the VAT tax rate in Cabinda is different to the rest of Angola. The business data steward working in that business area is one person who would know something like that as well. I appreciate this is not around privacy or security, but it is around that data. Also, Rick suggesting that the business data steward would know why are we storing the data and what are we using it for? What is its purpose? And what are the drivers for it? What is it supporting? Again, the steward, they're the ones that should know very clearly what the business drivers are, and they should, based on that, would also be very aware of any proposed changes or any thoughts. They should also be the experts able to provide that knowledge. We did mention the technical guys. So when was this data created? When was it last updated? When does it need to be purged, deleted? How is it formatted? And how many places is the database or data stored? So how are we getting here to the operational metadata? Operational metadata. Is this operational metadata? Is this technical metadata? Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Okay, does that make sense? I didn't actually find a place for the metadata steward except around all of these. You see the green line I put in goes all the way around.
What I wanted to ask you, and this is sort of where the metadata comes in, it's the metadata steward is also going to be responsible for where is the metadata stored and where does this metadata come from and where is the metadata used and shared. So,
and the quality.
Yeah, so this metadata came from Oracle or came from the data modeling tool Sparks or all those type of things. So that adds this. Basically, you can ask this whole what, where, the 5 wives and a husband of metadata. So that would be an interesting.
Most of the good metadata tools that I've seen does give you the opportunity to harvest that kind of information and show it and store it. But yeah, I think it's worth designing it into the meta model. And knowing who do you speak to, how do you do that kind of stuff.
Because there is a very nice section in the DMBOK that talks about in metadata, knowing exactly in your architecture, knowing exactly where it comes from, knowing all of this, all of these issues around the metadata. So, yeah.
I have to go and dig some more. But yeah, it'd be interesting to redraw this thing format.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a nice challenge. So maybe this touches on some of your stuff as well, Howard. So where are you going to get metadata from? From a physical databases, from a ERP systems, CRM systems, BI tools, integration tools, quality tools, even Excel, from your APIs, from data models, data sharing, program specs, dictionaries, and I'm sure there are umpteen others as well. And interesting enough, so I did say that I would touch on collaboration before I finish off. So as a data steward, very often things are not black and white. You have to work with people, you have to persuade people, you have to get their buy-in. So if you take what we would call the demographics of a customer, you would have a name and an initial and a surname, an ID number, date of birth, your gender, title, nationality, email address, cell number, etc. else, with the kind of for that. But in a large company, and most are these days, you'd have what typically people would call a customer. That's that loyalty customer. That's that person that might have a loyalty card that goes into a store and buy stuff or buy stuff online. And for customer, the basic attributes for customer would be these, but the rules might be ever so slightly different in that a customer is not a customer until they made their first purchase. But then there's likely to be built up around that customer outside of this lifestyle and spend. If you take a pharmacy patient, again, these are going to be consistent, but the medical history is going to be very, very unique. That's involved here is very unlikely to be able to see, touch, or even get close to this medical history. But that data steward and this data steward need to collaborate with the insurance data steward, with the financial services data steward to ensure that they get consistency across this lot. And I think this talks to some of that master and reference data stuff that you were doing last week, Howard, where how can you merge the customer data, patient data, insurance, policyholder data, account to a master record, if you're allowed to, obviously, and get consistency. Saying that, okay, the retail customer might well become. So what are the requirements of this data steward and this data steward to produce this kind of stuff with all of that, knowing that that data is sitting in one or more or many databases? It really does get interesting. And what these guys might define as the minimum quality rules for ID number, these guys should apply as well. It should be de facto standard typically here. So it really does encourage that collaboration, and it could be around sourcing and a whole bunch of other stuff. But again, if the collaboration is not happening here, that's when it gets escalated to the data owner. So it's going back to data working groups, to the data council, even the data governance steerco. If there's a lack of collaboration, a lack of willingness to work together. And then, so in terms of collaboration as well, if I take the business data steward, just some of the people that they are likely to collaborate with, to work with, to gather information from, to look for favors from, would be the architects, would be data engineers and the scientists, would be the data and business analysts and users and quality and BI, would be the risk and compliance privacy teams, would be the metadata steward, the technical steward, would be the data governance team, would be the data owner. They could, would, should work with all of these guys in ensuring that the metadata that they are capturing around their domain is accurate and valid. I mean, the architect might just tick off and say, yes, you've got your domain model right. The data engineers might be saying, yes, we enhanced that data, and have we added it into the glossary and onto the data catalog to show that the lineage and it's been enhanced and value added. Typically, also then the technical data steward is going to collaborate probably far more with architects and engineers and analysts and scientists and quality and DBAs and metadata and business and governance and integration. It touches on so many different areas. You know, there's metadata in data quality, there's metadata in databases and data architecture. It's that person, between the two of them, between the the technical data steward and the business data steward, they've got an enormous responsibility and need to take into account all of these people who could be providing information, that the metadata is properly captured and managed in terms of correct quality and sufficient usage, because they are the go-to people. The buck stops with them. And like I said, the technical steward probably is a strong technical specialist, probably part of the chief data officer's team or the data management team, part of IT, whereas the business data stewards are very often going to be part of business. And in the past, those two roles, they haven't really come together. There's a challenge and an opportunity for a huge amount of collaboration. I think I mentioned last week, working with the senior buyers at a retailer who had been seen as completely untouchable. Don't even talk to them, they were too busy. Through talking to them about quality and metadata, suddenly there was an incredible sense of teamwork and a willingness to help, that people were saying, oh wow, I don't know how you've achieved this. But it was being, guys, this is for you, it's for us, let's do it together. We did touch on the activities, the ones, again, that would be then. So I don't think a data steward would be defining the strategy, but they definitely would be helping. They definitely would understand the requirements, the user requirements, the business requirements, and the technical guy would understand the technical user requirements. I don't know that the business or technical data steward would actually be creating the data model, but yes, definitely they would be input onto what needs to be in place there. And yeah, we discussed earlier that ability to have views that could allow you to view data by domain and by job role. That would be part of driving under these requirements into there. Your metadata standards, what data do you have to have? What is the quality? And then distributing and delivering the metadata, that will also be very much a role for a business steward, technical data steward. And kind of those would be the deliverables, but it's very much more a day-to-day role. It could be based on sprints, but coming out of the requirements and coming out of the focus areas from the data strategy and then the domains and the ownership. And just on the hour is what I got. So open to questions, comments. I'd like to have people give me an opinion on who do they think would be the data stewards, business data stewards in a banking environment. If anybody's prepared to venture an opinion, I'd like to hear it. Unless we ask. I don't know who works. Didn't Michael work in a bank? Was he at the Reserve Bank?
Jürgen worked at the Reserve Bank.
Okay.
So Jürgen, your side on the data stewards, I think he's still around.
Yeah, still here, Howard. Thanks. Hope you can hear me clearly. I think
Yes.
for us, typical people will be your SMEs or your process engineers. They have a very good sense of how the department or the business is running. So they and who to collaborate with. So they understand the integrations as well. So they are the two top people that we peg to actually take on the role of data steward, business data steward.
How do you do it across the different divisions? Because you had, like, I know it used to be called FMD, and used to have, then you have surveillance,
Financial
and you had
markets and surveillance,
financial markets, and all of those. Because those are going to be different stewards, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, there are different stewards per department.
Yeah, so they're actually,
and depending on the size, we may have multiple
Yes,
data
obviously.
stewards. Or the other option is we have associate data stewards as well that actually report to the data steward that handle different probably subject areas or domain.
Yeah,
within each department.
I've seen that happen before. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
thanks.
Yeah, as we also discussed briefly last week in an organization where the same customer gets touched. One is the sales, one is the credit, one is insurance, one is geographic for deliveries. The data stewardship responsibility could move around that specific data as well. Yes, the core of the data around the customer has to be synchronized, it has to be unique, but the person that is doing the sale would not be able to handle the credit side of things, would not be able to handle the insurance side of things, probably wouldn't be able to handle the lay-by system.
And Drew, that's what I like to do in my reference and master data is, when you build that big 360, then what you actually do is try to segment the attributes that relate to sales, those that relate to credit, and you'd have those different levels of stewards responsible for those attribute sets that come around. Yeah. And we see
It's almost
Jürgen,
that data flows
yeah.
over the fence, over the fence, over the fence.
Yeah. Jürgen?
Interesting one, because sometimes the data cannot be owned by a single line of business, for example. It actually belongs to the enterprise.
Yeah.
And so there's that need for that enterprise data steward as well, which is more the business, probably the business architect layer, who's the candidate there, to take care of joining the dots between sales and procurement, and to actually keep that piece of information consistent and segregated and context across the organization for the different purposes. So there's that level.
And Jürgen, what we did in one of the banks, I was part of trying to set up the ownership in that of the customer, and they had a customer 360, and in the end of the day, it actually went to the person that was in charge of customer analytics, because they had the most passion about getting that data right. And so, it almost came to the master data team that were controlling those attributes. So, we find, what I found is there's no one rule in this, and it depends on who's passionate, who's dedicated to maintaining the quality and the accuracy and the trustworthiness of those attributes, and seeing who you can use to ensure that you get the right authority of that.
Yeah, typically there was another customer. Sorry, Drew. There was another customer in the insurance industry, and a candidate there, because they have different products and different product lines, different insurances and investment, etc., all bundled together as different services. And we put them together with the shared service.
Right.
The shared service is also another good candidate to have guys look.
Yeah.
Interesting. We tried that at an insurance company, and it was all going well until the brokers put their hands up and said, those are actually our customers. We need to sell product to them and take payment from them. But I'm not the hell going to let you interact with them to drive out the quality requirements. It was very, very funny.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else then?
Drew, also the question that comes up, and the technical data stewards. But maybe before I go there, one of the things that I've also been noticing is that I've seen lots of people that are data governance specialists going into becoming business data stewards. So they sort of are operating with that governance background and going into the business units, and then start to become the business data stewards. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name in Woolworths that And he
Not
announced on LinkedIn, like, oh, shucks, now all of a sudden he's a business data student. I thought, wow, this was about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's like, shucks, this is strange, because he was almost one of the lead data governance people, and then moved to become a business data student.
that, yeah, that's quite a strange move for me. Unless on his or her path into governance, they'd gone through the mill of quality and master data and a few of those, so they were fairly strong.
Yeah, that's where they come through.
Yeah, so then maybe having understood the governance requirements, there was more satisfaction gain in helping to implement those things in a business unit. That's the only way I would see it. Because typically the governance people that I've come across are too high level, too theoretical, and quite frankly wouldn't fit in most business units. They get chased away.
And then the next one was that term, because there seemed to be a sort of moving to technical custodian, trying to, sort of, almost move that ownership away, and just I've seen situations where we've chosen to call the technical data stewards technical custodians, those that look after the data on behalf of the business, just so that there wasn't that thing of, well, who's the person responsible for this data.
Yeah, I quite like that, because the DBA is a technical custodian of the data that is stored in that database, and is ensuring all of those availability and stuff. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. As separate that it's the business who creates and maintains the actual data attributes, and it's the technical custodians who provide the tools to access and store and maintain that data.
The backup, the continuity, making sure that they look after the integrity of the data on behalf of the business data steward.
It's availability. It's making sure that the correct access rights are in place. That, as Veronica talked about the other day, people like Howard can't do a drop table.
on the group file.
Yes. I once deleted uncatalogued the network link, so there was no terminals attached, but that was also a minor little glimpse.
Oh. Excellent.
But yeah, Drew, custodian,
any other questions from anybody around? Any comments? Drew, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for the effort and the work that you put in. There's some tricky areas on this operational business and technical metadata.
I was scratching my head on this one the last few days, believe me. You write a bit, then walk a bit, then write a bit, and walk a bit. But a delightful topic. It's I think one of the most exciting parts of data management. It's where everything comes together. I used my octopus analogy. Its fingers in all of those pies, and those sensitive little tentacles that are touching on someone, is really strong arms that are grabbing others.
And look at the new tools. Well, not the new tools, but look at what Click and all these tools are doing. They're trying to grab onto and become that metadata repository, the data catalog version 2. So many of these fancy analytical tools are trying to own that metadata of everything that's going on. So
I wouldn't like to have to make a decision to procure if it was only for the metadata. As I'm seeing happen quite often, people are buying a governance tool, or they're buying a quality tool and a modeling tool, and there's the metadata, the glossary catalog piece that comes with it. Like I mentioned previously, I had you mentioned version 2. I had a look at originally that IBM is one of their IGC, the Information Governance Catalog, that's built on the back of their banking data model, and the amount of intelligence that was built in there, especially for things like the IFRS reporting and the Basel reporting and all of the rest and the lineage range, price point, and I believe it's actually been enhanced quite significantly since then. So if they've gone there, I'm sure a lot of the others have done the same.
So there's a question from Michael in terms of if you to build a data management office or a data office from scratch, would you start with data catalog or metadata and reference data? Where would you start?
I would, with one of the primary data domains, so say customer or product, and identify the critical data elements within that, and then start the journey to say, well, if those are the critical data elements, what are the most important data management considerations? So it would be quality, it would be master reference data, it would be metadata, it could be privacy and security. Kind of focusing, build those almost, I see those things as a matrix that you do one and it impacts and touches on all the others, because that way you'll also then identify a candidate data stewards, incrementally start looking at their requirements and do they align with what the business strategy is. If you start with a domain like customer, and the business strategy or the business vision is customer centricity, you've got a very clear message what it is that the business is hoping to do across all of their customers, across all the bases. And then you can start building your data management organization in support of that. That's the way I would do it. You've got to take it in bite-sized chunks, and you've got to take it in the disciplines where I think you can demonstrate results.
Yeah, Drew, and that's for me. That's where the trick comes in. I liked your last statement about demonstrating results. Now, when we go to business and we say, well, how do we show results? Typically, they want to show results based on a KPI. For example, cross-sell, uplift in increasing cross-sells or campaigns or whatever it is. Now, unfortunately, that increase on cross-sell is not always restricted to one domain. So you could have product and customer, and now things get a little bit trickier. Now, one of the things I like to do is to say, what is the smallest use case that delivers value, and then have to look at getting the smallest amount of data per, if you master data or whatever it is, and then whether you need the metadata, it's just focusing, being hyper-focused on the use case, and then bring in those critical data and metadata elements and data quality and even, as you say, data privacy. Those things are, so we focus on delivering business value, and we don't go to deliver every single policy, procedure, domain, but we just do the domains that are required. Yeah.
And it could also be, I know that's something that you're quite keen on as well, is do a maturity assessment for that specific domain.
Yeah.
But also, if you get the opportunity, just go and spend time in that business and say, well, you guys are wanting to increase your cross-sell or your upsell. Yeah. What is holding you back at the moment? And if you interrogate that, you're more than likely to get an answer from them and an agreement that if you put stuff in place, you could change, you could measure the metrics.
Pains and gains. So what are the pains and gains around, and what do we hope to gain, and what are the current pains? Michael, does that help you, Michael?
But it takes me to one of my gripes. You got people in the called business analysts who should be able to understand what it is involved in cross-selling or upselling or whatever else, but they don't. And it people to understand how that data works and what the triggers are to change that metric.
And I was at a
That answers my question. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Michael. I was certainly at a conference yesterday where there were so many people saying data people really and business analysts need to talk about business literature and literacy and business acumen. So do we understand the business? Can we talk their language and then translate it into data?
I think most of us that have worked in BI learned how to listen and talk to business. Had an opportunity to spend time and understand what it is that they were trying to do, what it is that they were being measured on, and worked with them. I was incredibly privileged to work with a chap like Martin Deal, who took time out to explain to me things. And so for those that don't know, Martin ended up as the logistics director for the whole of the Edcon group, as well as the MD for CNA and a whole bunch of others. Probably one of the brightest guys I know. But he got data and he was able to translate that requirement. I've been chatting to him of late around master data, metadata, and he's still passionate. But yeah, I think people, including the BAs, get so wrapped up in their processes, and have they filled in this error stock and have they done that requirement, that they've never actually spent time in business.